Zero.
It was a headline I saw in an article from the 80s.
Instead of murder, she wrote, maggots, she wrote.
Maggots, she wrote.
That's terrible. That's gross.
It's a little gross, but I mean, tonight's topic is going to be a little bit gross.
Well, it will be for some. So you've been warned.
Right. We are going to be talking about forensic entomology.
And it took me only a week to remember how to say that.
Really? Were you trying to say entomology?
I don't know.
No? Okay.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge.
I'm Charles.
I'm Michelle. We're happy to be here, and we have an unusual topic. It's a little out of our realm. It's more science than we usually get into.
I wanted to talk about that, though. We've never really given a good explanation. So the whole point of what we do is it's a shed. We throw everything in there, you know, the old spades and shovels and whatnot. So we're a show that loves to just go, you know, left field once in a while.
Sure.
And sometimes we're going to do like our last episode, we talked about one crime, and sometimes we're going to go crazy with 20 crimes. And today we're going to talk about little creepy crawlies.
That's right. And this topic is super interesting.
It is. It is.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge. And if you like us, or even if you don't, please.
Why do you have to say even if you don't? No,
okay.
they're going to come out of the woodwork. No. Let's keep going. Let's let the train
Please share us. Please visit our Patreon page. Please go to our website. Visit us on Instagram and iTunes and all of the spots and websites where you can listen to podcasts.
You can find the podcast anywhere, wherever you're listening to it right now and anywhere else.
Yeah, we appreciate you. So here we are tonight talking about
bugs.
Bugs.
Really?
That's my bug sound.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite bug?
My favorite bug is I forget what it's called, but it kind of looks like a walking leaf. You know what I mean? I don't know, but
I might be called a leaf. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. I know there's sticks.
I like praying mantises a lot.
Praying mantises are pretty freaking awesome.
They're super cool, and they can turn their little heads, and they
like
use their little
ladybugs?
hands. Ladybugs are cute, but
you don't. Yeah, I'm not into cute. I want the creepy ones.
I mean, I don't know. I think all bugs are fascinating, really.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, if you look at just an average ant, how much they get done and how organized they are. Yeah.
Cockroaches, they get a lot done too.
I'm not a fan of cockroaches.
Why not?
Not a fan because they're disgusting.
Okay. But okay, so what about here's your $60 word. Necrophilious insects.
That sounds really gross already.
Well, that's our topic tonight, though.
But anytime the word necro comes into it, I'm worried.
Worried? Well, you're the one who agreed we were going to talk about forensic entomology.
I know. Let's get going.
Forensic entomology.
Yeah.
So when I suggested this topic, what was your first reaction?
I was worried that I wouldn't have enough to say because, it's pretty specific and it's a little bit sciencey.
Oh, well, okay. But I mean, I think it's kind of a cool thing that we can.
It doesn't involve any pop culture. We'll put it that way.
So we'll go into a little bit of the science. You want to go into some of the science now? All right. Yeah. So the gold standard of forensic entomology is something called the blowfly.
They're kind of the star of the show.
Yeah, but I really want to know, why are they called blowfly?
I was wondering that as well.
Because when you die, it blows?
Maybe.
I don't know. And so there's over 1,100 species of blowflies in the world, which is kind of key to remember because each one of them has a slightly different life cycle.
They're kind of the little green one.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some variations of them. And so part of the thing is that all insects are ectothermic, and ectothermic just means that their life cycle is affected, dependent, and coexists with the weather and the environment. Like that changes everything about them. Changes the speed of their life cycle. So for example, in Hawaii, It's really moist. And so a body decomposes really fast. And in some place like Alaska, not so much. Here, we're in Arizona, so it's kind of in the middle. It's kind of fast because it's hot as fuck here. But also because it's hot as fuck, that kind of changes things. It's really dry environment. And a lot of these bugs, they like really moist environments.
Well, and that's too, I also read why, for the most part, the blowflies and the insects in general will, when we're talking about bodies here, corpses, of course, but that's why they'll start with the mouth or the eyes, because that's the most moist environment, and then they can kind of burrow in.
Right. And along that same line, sometimes to get a little bit into what can forensic entomology do is it can even pinpoint possible wounds, because a wound would be like a mouth or a nostril. It'd be a moist area. So you might see a little biomass of maggots, because folks, that's what we're talking about here, maggots.
Right.
And you'll see them like, oh, okay, there's lots of maggots in the stomach. I bet you there's a wound there, a stab wound or something like that.
You might initially think that it was a gunshot because maybe there's a gun present, but actually it's a stab wound, and you can tell based on the outline of the eggs deposited.
And so there's a couple of ways that they use this information within dealing with a body. And it expands from there. One is thermobiology. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now is how the weather and the life stages are affected. Not all bugs work, right? Spiders and scorpions, they don't have stages. They just get a little bigger each day, right? So you don't have a distinct line. But flies, they have stages.
A very clear cycle.
Right, extremely clear. And then there's the second one. Oh, and so what happens is from that you can determine when somebody died. You can exonerate or convict somebody, and it's called time of death. It's called postmortem interval. There's a technical term for us, right? PMI. And the second way is ecological succession. This was the part that kind of fascinated me the most, but it's also that when somebody shows up, an insect shows up to the buffet.
Oh.
No.
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 So they show up and they start doing their thing. That changes the body, it changes the environment, and it makes it suitable for the next stage, right? So it becomes this thing called ecological succession, that the next thing that shows up is going to be beetles, because fly larvae are pretty tasty.
Right.
And so from there, and then you get wasps, and it kind of goes on from there. So
depending on the phase, whatever phase the corpse is in,
right,
or the body.
So you want me to go through that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so let's start with day one. The body, somebody has just died, and 2 miles away.
And this is also depending on if they're inside or outside. So we're going to assume they're outside.
Yeah, this is an assumption that they're outside because every variable affects it. If they're buried, then these stages drop down because it's a different environment.
Yeah,
different
so we're talking
animals.
about a body outside and
deposited
exposed elements.
in the woods, right? Yeah. Okay. So it's day one. Somebody just got killed and just dropped in the woods and walked away. So 2 miles away, there's something called a blowfly going, ooh, what is that? I smell that. I smell something. Oh, I know what that is. And they come running. Within 10 minutes from the death is a blowfly showing up. And that's why
it's amazing.
Yeah, that's why they're the gold standard, is because within that 10-minute period, give or take, it could be winter or it could be nighttime, and that'll affect things. But that gives you a really close approximation of when somebody died.
And I also want to mention that, as kind of gruesome as this topic is, it's also the natural order of things.
Absolutely.
This is nature. This is what happens to all the cycles of life. So it sounds kind of gruesome, but it's also just the natural order of things.
Absolutely. I guess maybe should we clarify that? Like we're weirdos. We appreciate that, and some people may be totally grossed out. How could you possibly want to talk about this?
Right. Well, I guess we just did.
So we did. Okay.
There you go.
So day one, blowflies, scorpion flies, and so these guys, they smell death, they show up, and they start laying little eggs. And I almost forgot. So
what are you doing?
I have show and tell.
Oh no! Did you bring flies? You're not going to release the flies in here, are you?
Well, I have one live one, but not a fly.
No.
Okay. So these are here we go. So the stages, right? So a fly shows up, and
there's like a science experiment happening in here. He has a cup, this little cup with all these little objects in it that I can't tell exactly what they are.
They're like little tiny vials.
Okay, yeah. They're little vials full of...
So one of the... And I couldn't find a blowfly. This is a green bottle fly.
Where did you find this?
Well, so because we're all trapped at home and I'm single...
You've been collecting dead flies?
No. It's just that I'm single, so I don't have to shower. Like, when I go to the mailbox, I have to beat the flies away.
What?
And I didn't see you last week. So it's been 2 weeks I didn't need to shower. So I had like
there's
beetles.
No way you didn't shower for 2 weeks.
I had beetles trying to drag me off this morning.
No, I don't believe that for a minute.
Okay. So you saw that, the little fly. And then
there's 2 flies in a little bag.
Yeah. And then so the next thing is they lay eggs. Mm-hmm. And so
did you find little fly eggs?
No.
Where did you get this little vial?
Oh, so I get to plug a place called Dead Insects. Wait, what is this? This is deadinsects.net.
Oh my gosh, that's a thing?
It's a thing.
I hope they have day jobs. Who's buying these dead
I don't know.
insects?
But so there's a vial. So the eggs, and they're tiny little, like
this is
smaller
an egg?
than a grain of rice.
So it's a little vial, and it looks like a little turd, but it's some kind of like a larvae. Is that how you say it? Larvae.
Yeah, larva. How long would you say that is? It's about
half an inch.
Half an inch, maybe even a little bit less.
It's labeled BB fly larva.
Mm-hmm. And so the length of these, that's something that's really relevant, right? Because they when they collect them from the body, if say they've shown up and they found the body within 23 hours, right? And so they'll have really small ones and they won't have any other stage. But let's imagine it's been a little bit longer than that. And so day 2, it's the next day, and that first stage of larva that I showed you is starting to appear, and they're chowing down. And I don't mean to be crude, but it's like snap, crackle, and pop. They're just going through the buffet, and it's like a frat party gone crazy, and they're just eating everything in the house. And eventually...
and this is part of the natural order. Like we said, this is what happens when things go back to the earth. Right.
And so they're there, and they start laying little pupae, right?
I'm afraid what's in that vial.
It's just there. So it's a little, so they're, like a butterfly has a chrysalis, they have a little pupae. Mm-hmm. And so they have that. So you want to describe that?
It just looks like a little...
Like a rat poop, a shiny rat poop.
It's just a little, it's a fatter larva. Larva, yeah.
So now the beetles are showing up to the party. There's hister beetles, clown beetles. I like that name. Ringo Starr, the beetles come snooping because they want a buffet, but they're looking for fly babies, eggs and larvae and stuff, and maybe poop too.
It all gets consumed.
Yeah, and eventually, your neighborhood housefly even shows up, and
late to the party.
Mm-hmm. And then you get then the names start getting really creative, right? So now we're entering the next stage of the body, which is when decay begins. The body is now bloating, right? Mm-hmm. And you get things like burying beetles.
Okay. I think I've seen everything we've looked at. I think I've seen in my backyard at some point.
Really? Well, how many bodies are you hiding in your yard?
They all look familiar. I mean, they just look like regular bugs to me.
Yeah. It just, so you would say that just looks like a regular little black beetle.
It looks like a regular little beetle.
Right? So this one, the next one, So bush flies, coffin flies, humpback flies. I mean,
I love the names of these
it
insects.
sounds like a fucked up Disney movie. Hunchback flies.
Yeah, well, it sounds, I mean, the names make them sound even creepier.
Right. Rove beetles. And this one is, looking here. Oh, okay. So here is one species of carrion beetle, right? And it's hard to see in the light, but there's a red mark across his back.
I see that.
Okay. And so you get the body now starts splitting open, right? Now the whole neighborhood knows there's a buffet. And
the insects are getting larger and larger as the process goes on?
Well, at this point, so now we're to about day 5, day 6, right? The body is split open. There's less to eat. And so by day 6, most of the flies, all the different varieties of flies, they're already starting to crawl out, make those little pupae and fly off and do the same thing somewhere else. And the beetles are eating what they can catch. And then like skin beetles show up. They're a little late to the party, right? All the booze is gone, nothing but stale potato chips and beef jerky.
I don't know. No, that's terrible. No.
Okay. So the flies hatch and then, so even the beetles, they have their predators, right? So the, you end up with, okay, so here's this one. This is my gem because this one's alive. This one's alive. No. Yeah. So
remember those hissing beetles? It's not going to hiss at me, is it?
Oh, no, this is a wasp.
You have a wasp in our recording room.
Check this out. He's in a container.
Is he in a bad mood?
He's in there.
What are you going to do with this thing? I don't see him in here, Charles.
What do you mean? He was in here when I drove over here.
He is not in here, and this lid is loose.
What are you talking about?
There's no wasp in there.
Yeah, there is.
No, there is not.
Did he get out?
There's not a wasp in there.
Oh, oh shit, there's a hole on the side.
It's very funny. Very, very funny. I'm going to get you back.
That wasn't... I thought I'd have you going a little bit better.
No. Ridiculous. I'm going to put a wasp in your booze. Oh, man.
Anyway.
Well, I was just thinking it's in your car.
Oh, well, okay. Good thing that's not happened.
Good thing I don't freak out. Lucky.
So anyway, to round it all out, so the flies are gone, and now day 7, it's beetle world. And then you go into post-decay, right? Now there's just dry skin, cartilage, bones, and beetles even the beetles are running out of stuff. You'll get cheese flies because they smell cheese. I guess, it's what we smell like after 3 months.
I don't know.
At the end, it's just skeletal remains and the party's gone. It's, why
does it have to be a party?
It's like, well, no, it's not now. It's like a burnt out crack house in Albuquerque.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Detroit.
Okay.
So now you get sap beetles and carpet beetles because they can eat cartilage and hair, and sometimes you get a wasp's nest and things like that. So that kind of was a
rundown on what to expect.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I like it. I mean, I'm glad that there isn't a wasp flying around in the room. I'm a little distracted.
Okay, well, so I'll round it out by saying I wanted to make a point that we're talking about the gruesome side of this, but it's kind of interesting when we dig into this that forensic entomology, it's not just solving, picking time of death based on what critters are in your body, right? I mean, there's interesting scenarios where like somebody maybe drives across the country, right, to commit a crime and the bug splattered on your windshield or, I don't know, stuck in your car filter or something like that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you about a story that took place over the 4th of July weekend in 2003.
Okay.
It happened on Sunday, July 6th in Bakersfield, California. And it was a shocking mass murder of 5 family members. And this was the Harper family. Joni Harper, she was a 39-year-old mother of 3. She was very well educated and had worked for the local school district. And she was really well liked in her community, very involved in her church. as well as her mother, Ernestine, who was 70 years old and also a victim of this crime. Joni was living with her mom, Ernestine, and her 3 children. The children were Lindsay, a 2-year-old girl, a beautiful little girl, Marshall, a 6-week-old infant, and Marquis, a 4-year-old little boy. On that afternoon, they were all taking a nap together. That was their routine. They would attend church together, come home, take a nap, and then go to evening services. During their afternoon nap, an intruder came into the home and shot Joni twice in the head, proceeded to kill one of the children. Ernestine heard that something was going on, and she started screaming and running down the hallway. She'd actually grabbed her gun.
Oh, okay.
But she didn't get the chance to use it.
No.
She came down the hallway and was also shot. The intruder then returned to Joni's room, where the remaining children were still on the bed, and murdered those children. It's horrible. It's horrific. And the little boy, Marquis, who was only 4 years old, was so frightened. He actually bit, I think he was a thumbsucker, and he bit his hand all the way to the bone.
Oh, my God.
He was so frightened.
Oh, can we go back to talking about bugs?
It's horrible. So this poor family was executed. And it was 2 days later that Joni's friend realized she hadn't heard from her and went to the house and found an unlocked back door and went in and discovered what had happened.
Oh, it's
horrible.
Yeah.
So after the investigators had arrived and were trying to piece everything together, they wanted to make contact with Joni's husband, Vincent Brothers.
Oh, he wasn't there.
Vincent Brothers was visiting his brother Melvin in Columbus, Ohio, and didn't realize what had happened.
Oh.
He was contacted by investigators, and immediately they became suspicious because of the way he reacted. He didn't ask a lot of questions and didn't seem to want to know any details.
Maybe he was just in shock.
Could be. That could be. So the murder took place during the middle of the day, and this was a corner house on a busy street, and the intruder took the time to cover the bodies with blankets and pillows from other rooms and create a burglary scene.
Oh, wow.
So they spent a lot of time there, and you would think all of these gunshots, and it's during the middle of the day on a Sunday when people are home.
Was this?
It was very brazen.
Was this a busy, like in the city, or was this a suburb? Or?
It's a suburb of Bakersfield, but it was. I think the house was across the street from a school, and it was a busy area, and it was a corner house on this kind of busy street. So it was, and for something like that to happen in the middle of the day was unusual, and very unusual to murder these children so unnecessarily. So when the investigators first spoke to Vincent Brothers, the husband of Joni, they determined that the couple had been separated for about 3 months. Previous to their separation, Vincent had been living in the home of Joni's mother, Ernestine, but after they separated, he had his own apartment. And they were concerned about his welfare because they didn't understand why this entire family had been murdered, and they were worried that perhaps someone was coming after him now as well.
Right.
And when Vincent returned, he didn't attend the memorial service, but he did attend the funeral.
Oh, okay.
So Vincent Brothers was born in May of 1962. He was very well educated and very well liked. He was a longtime educator and was the current vice principal of John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield. He holds a master's degree in education from California State University, Bakersfield, and a bachelor's degree from Norfolk State University. Vincent and Joni married in 2000, and that marriage didn't last very long. It was annulled because she found out that he had lied to her.
Annulled? That has to be, what is that? That's like under 3 months or 6 months or something?
I think something like that. So she found out he had lied about his previous 3 marriages and he was unfaithful to her.
Okay.
But so it was annulled in that September. And then January of 2003, they remarried when she was pregnant with their 3rd child.
Wait. It was annulled, but they had time to have 2 kids?
So the relationship was real rocky.
So forget my math. I'm confused.
The relationship was very rocky. It was very on and off. So they were married twice, basically.
Okay.
They got married, divorced, had more children, and then remarried again.
Okay.
And then they moved in with Ernestine, Joni's mom. During the previous relationships and marriages, he had been incarcerated for spousal abuse and all kinds of just drama where he was abusive a lot. And I don't think she realized that about him as well.
Oh.
And he was always unfaithful. Brothers had been married 4 times and was briefly incarcerated for spousal abuse. And he had a daughter, Margaret Kern Brothers, who was with his girlfriend while attending California State University, Bakersfield.
Okay.
In 1988, he was convicted of misdemeanor spousal abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and was put on probation. He married for a second time in 1992, and the following year, that wife sued for divorce, claiming that he had threatened to kill her and was violent.
Oh, so he had history.
He had history.
Okay.
In 1996, he sexually harassed a woman that he worked with. And she claimed that during a visit to his home, he hit her and was just abusive overall and had harassed her at work as well. But the police talked her out of filing any charges because he was this educator and he was well-liked and they felt like it would ruin his career.
I hate that shit.
I know. If these charges had continued to pile up against him, maybe it would have made a difference. I don't know.
Maybe.
So he was eventually arrested for the murder of his 5 family members. Mm-hmm. And during his trial in 2007, prosecutors emphasized his past marriages and the difficulties that brought him and Joni to separate and why they had originally divorced. And it was shown that he had lied 41 or more times on the stand. He did take the stand on his own.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is pretty rare. But he also had left Bakersfield in an attempt to create his own alibi. He had flown to Columbus, Ohio for a long holiday weekend with his brother Melvin that he hadn't seen in like 10 years, which in itself is a little odd.
Okay, yeah.
And then at one point, he rented a car and drove approximately 2,000 miles each way within a 72-hour period.
I've done that before. I've driven across
72 hours.
I've driven from Phoenix to Boston in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of driving.
Yeah, it is.
So the trip was intended to be an alibi, but the investigators ended up using a forensic entomologist to search out several hundred dead insects from the air filter and radiator of the rental car.
Oh.
The rental car had only previously been rented 5 times. Okay. And those 5 renters testified that they hadn't taken it west of the Rocky Mountains. So this, the entomologist, Lynn Kimsey, UC Davis professor of entomology and museum director, stated that the insects we found were consistent with 2 major routes to get to California from the east. In particular, it was a grasshopper with and this is me, not her saying this, but in particular, it was a distinctive grasshopper that had red legs.
Oh.
So once she saw that this grasshopper was stuck in the radiator.
Right. Kind of hard to miss red legs.
Yeah. She knew that this grasshopper is really only present in Oklahoma and Texas.
Ah.
And she wasn't even sure when she started this process if they could find out any information at all. She assumed that the bugs would be like just almost disintegrated and mashed up. But here's this grasshopper that the only way that grasshopper got there is if you were in Oklahoma or Texas at some point.
Wow. And you said she had testified that, or sorry, the previous renters had testified they had not been there.
They had not been that far. And the car mileage was over 4,500 miles on the car.
Obviously a giveaway.
When he rented it.
I mean, that's got to be a hell of a bill when you turn the car back in.
Right. And on top of his lies, where at one point he testified that he had hit a child on a bicycle with a car while he was in Columbus. It was just a small incident that nobody filed charges. The child was fine, but it further proved as an alibi that he was there.
If you have the kid to prove it.
Well, immediately that night after the testimony, they brought in the man who was actually driving the car that was involved in the incident. So it disproved him there. Then
so he was stealing somebody else's story.
He was stealing a random story. And then also he had receipts that proved he had been in Columbus, and the receipts were proved to be his brother Melvin forging his signature and shopping for him to further his alibi. And Melvin finally did confess that he had done this for Vincent.
Ooh, so he probably did some time.
I don't know. I didn't see that mentioned anywhere. Probably not, since he confessed and they were able to use it against him. Probably not. But yeah, so he lied and lied. And when he was on the stand, he was so believable. Watching him on the stand, he sobbed and cried and just so believable. And the prosecution was concerned that the jury would believe his stories. But once they were able to prove with science and facts over and over again that his stories weren't credible and he was lying, he was convicted in 2007, where he sits on death row at San Quentin. And the whole story is so sad. It's so unnecessary. They think his motivation was that he wanted to move on because he did find out that Joni was going to file for divorce, and he didn't want to be financially responsible for this,
three children.
But she was so strong and she was such a good mother that it's likely she wouldn't have really even wanted his help or support. But so he does sit on death row, and his daughter, from his only remaining child from the relationship he had when he was in college,
right? She
was able to make a statement in front of the jury in the court. She said, "I am leaving my name known as Margaret Kern." So she changed her name, and she went on to state that I don't have a father now. He is just a man handcuffed to a chair, looking straight ahead. He will never see me again until it's his time to die. Wow. And she has said that she would be at his execution. She's just so bitter about the loss of her family, too, because she lost her siblings.
Right.
And so, yeah, he sits on death row. Also, along with, there's a lot of famous death row inmates at San Quentin, Scott Peterson. And yeah, it's a tragic story, and it's terrible and so unnecessary. But the forensic entomology, being able to discover those bugs within that car, because the car had been washed.
Right.
But they were able to pick out those insects within the air filter and the radiator and prove that he wasn't where he said he was.
Man, I need to clean my car.
But who would think of that?
Yeah, that's insane. And like you said, they cleaned those cars. I wouldn't have expected that anything would even be left.
But because it was still a fairly new car, they're not going to change out the radiator and the filters and all of that.
Right. I mean, it's crazy how long the U.S. has really only been doing this for the last 30, 40 years in any kind of real effort to use entomology as a way to solve these crimes. And kind of to clarify for anyone out there that doesn't know, forensics, I think because of movies and stuff like that, TV, we associate forensics with dead bodies.
Right.
And your story is proof that forensic it just means to apply a science to the solving of a crime.
Right.
In fact, so our past shows have been kind of history based. We've been doing a lot of history stuff. So I decided I was going to stay really modern on this one. And so I'm going to start in 1247 AD.
That's so modern for you. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So there was a Chinese lawyer, Sun Tzu, who wrote a criminal investigation textbook in 1247. And so that actually has the first recorded evidence of somebody using
I love this story.
entomology. You know this one? Yeah. And so it's the book was called Shi Yanji Lo, which basically translates to washing away of wrongs. And what he describes in the story was that they had found a victim just slashed repeatedly next to the road, and rice fields everywhere, right? And investigators suspected the murder weapon was probably a sickle because that's what they used to harvest rice. But everyone carried a goddamn sickle.
So there's a whole group of farmers, and they're all using the same tool.
How the hell are you going to do that? So the local magistrate brings all of the workers together and lines them up and tells them, lay down your sickles out there in front of me and out on the road or whatever, the court. And they're all standing there with all their sickles lined out, and everyone's waiting, and 5 minutes go by, and
you would think they would be looking for blood or something like that.
But what are you going to find? Those things look clean. And then all of a sudden, a few flies show up, and then a few more flies show up, and they start congregating on one sickle, and you can see the dude sweating like, oh shit, that's my sickle. Flies as judge and jury. Oh shit. Yeah, because they, again, like blowflies, can smell death from miles away within minutes. And,
I think it's like the enzymes or something. Yeah.
And so, they showed up and he was fucked.
Wow.
So that is the first case, the first example of forensic entomology.
That's so amazing.
But then it just kind of became this slow buildup of knowledge, the age of reason, right? The 1700s up until... Well, I don't know. We're not in the age of reason right now. Bodies were dug up, inspected, research done, bugs identified, books written, the whole thing. And by the 1800s, this is when physicians and investigators are starting to maybe apply, maybe we can kind of use some of this to solve some crimes. And one of the first examples of, again, insect succession, that different stages of what insect is going to be there. In 1855, there was a doctor, Bergeret d'Arbois, he was a French doctor, that used this to determine that post-mortem interval of human remains. Because this poor couple, they moved into a new place, right? And they're remodeling their new home in Paris, and they're tearing away to redo the fireplace. And behind the mantle, they find a mummified kid. Oh, shit. So they report it to the authorities, and the authorities arrest them.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? Dude, we just moved in. What the hell?
Right.
So this guy, Bergeret, he autopsied the victim, and he noted evidence of insect populations on the corpse, right? Flesh flies that looked like they had to have been, that was probably around 1848. And then mites show up when the body is pretty much desiccated dry, right? So they're showing up in 1849 and laying their eggs. And there's like evidence of moths who definitely don't show up when a body is moist, right?
Right.
And so from all of this, he was able to conclude, like 1848, 1849 is about your time scale. And they had to let them go because, well, shit, they just moved in. And they went back to the people who owned the flat before in 1848, arrested and convicted them. So that brings you forward that there wasn't a lot done, but when, like in the U.S., they would say, oh, no, it's a whole new thing. But in the U.S., other places were starting to apply this. In 1935, there was a poor lady on a bridge. Poor lady's just looking out. It's a nice Scottish landscape. And she looks down. There's a stream below her. And, oh, shit, there's a severed arm.
Oh.
And so eventually authorities find 70 body parts.
Wow.
Yeah. Today they call the place the Devil's Beef Tub.
Really?
I can't say that. The Devil's Beef Tub.
That's gross.
Right. So basically the same thing. They used maggots and pinned down the time of death, and they were able to convict Isabella Ruxton and her maid, Mary Rogerson, were slaughtered by Isabella's physician husband because he knew how to chop up a body, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that it's not until like the 1972 that we started opening body farms and stuff in the U.S. They opened one in like Knoxville, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also one in Florida, which is so helpful because they can view the stages of the decomposition and determine, like we've been discussing, at what stage did they die at. It's really helpful to law investigators to determine where to start looking, because it can either alibi someone or not alibi, or blow someone's alibi up. And I was telling you earlier about this story on one of these body farms where usually what they do is they cage the bodies because the insects, they just want the insects. Mm-hmm. But then they also want to be able to look at what happens if it isn't caged and it's just exposed. What happens when animals are able to,
They must have to like tag the bodies, because I could just see some coyote dragging the body.
Well, it's all very fenced off, and they have like video footage, and it's very controlled.
Oh shit! Where's our body? No, we can't do.
Yeah, well, and the bodies they're donated, they're volunteered.
Right. They must be like, I wonder what, like nurses or something, because I don't know many people that
would do that.
Right. Hey, take my body and...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people do donate,
to science. Yeah,
they do. But they had this footage of vultures that were devouring the body. I don't know of a better word to use, but what they determined is that when the vultures get there, they move the body around a lot. Mm-hmm. And one of the investigators was saying that this would make a huge difference in their investigation, because you can't assume that the body is laying in the state it was when it first landed, because the animals move it all around. Mm-hmm. And it could move a weapon. It could, it changes everything. So This kind of science and discovery is so important.
Well, and I think it's important too, because I mean, it's not just gonna like convict somebody because we're trying to get down to a specific time a crime happened. You're also like exonerating people,
Absolutely, yeah. This can free people that are innocently in prison. It could free them. I'm aware of a woman that was convicted in Las Vegas. She was 18 years old, and she was charged in 2001 for the murder of Duran Bailey. He was a homeless man in Las Vegas. She was tried twice for the crime, and she's always maintained her innocence. But it wasn't until 2017 that the charges were finally dropped. So she spent 16 years falsely accused and innocent in prison for a crime she didn't commit. Okay. And it was because of forensic entomology that they were able to go back and determine that her alibi was true and correct, because the maggots that were present wouldn't. When they showed up, she was with someone else and not anywhere near the crime scene.
Why? So why did they?
Why did it take so long to allow for this evidence? I think personally, there was a lot of laziness on the part of the court system, and they just really didn't want to be bothered with forensic entomology. And it wasn't until they got a new attorney, general attorney or state attorney, that finally they were, and also a lot of these innocence groups got involved with her case and started raising even more and more attention to her cause, that then they finally were able to get another hearing and were able to set her free. But without the forensic entomology, she'd probably still be in prison.
That's the sad thing, is it's been around for a while, but I don't think that a lot of people here. I've got a story that's very similar in Canada that it was there, but no one gave it the time of day, or maybe they just didn't have the information. But Canada, they really screwed this up in 1959. And this is actually, in Canada, this is an extremely well-known case, because it actually, in the early stages of this story, it led to them overturning death sentences. Like they no longer did death sentences.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So In 1959, Stephen Truscott, he was a 14-year-old kid, and he was found guilty in Godric, Ontario, of killing and raping his schoolmate, Lynn Harper, who was just 12. And he was sentenced to hang, which Canada, 1959, Jesus Christ, I thought you guys were nice up there. You hanging people in 1959?
A child at that.
Yeah. And so he was, at the time, he was the youngest convicted murderer in Canada history. Yeah. And I mean, there was a temporary reprieve. Some guy that Pierre Burton wrote a poem. I don't know how to explain it. It was called Requiem for a 14-year-old. It was just basically lambasting that they would do this to a 14-year-old kid, regardless of whether or not he was innocent or guilty. And it got people up in arms. In January 1960, Truscott he appealed for leniency and was denied. He maintained his innocence, but the government suddenly commutes his sentence to life imprisonment, and he's eligible for parole in 1969. But, dude, this is your life. Suck it up. You killed a girl. But there were a lot of people that felt there was some miscarriage of justice here, because Burton's poem had kind of gotten a lot of attention. People were all up in arms about it. And one of those people was Isabelle Labourdais. And she was just, a woman that was a mother. She was a mother and had a son that was about the same age. And she started looking into this and ended up having a little more time. Well, no, she didn't have time, because she ended up being a widow. Her husband died. And so she has to take a job, but she's still doggedly researching. I mean, she probably researched this better than any scientist or any cop did. In fact, I know for a fact she did better than any of the cops did, because their investigation was 2 days. Yeah. So I'll get into it in a second, but she does this book, and it's 1965, and she wants Canada to publish this book, but it's like a legal hot potato. They ain't publishing it. So she gets it published in England, and it's a bestseller. And now the U.S. and Canada start publishing the book. So now everyone is aware about this, and it actually forces the government to look into the case again. I mean, they probably didn't want to. They just wanted to shove this under the rug. So 1966, her book is a bestseller, and it's just called The Trial of Stephen Truscott. So her book influences action. It leads to these questions, and there's a review ordered on the case, a new trial basically before the Canadian Supreme Court. So the actual crime was in Clinton, Ontario, a little out of the way. It's halfway between Toronto and Detroit. And it's June 9th, 1959. Stephen and Lynn, they're just a couple of kids, both kids of Canadian Air Force parents. There was a base near there. And a lot of the locals weren't fond of the fact that there was a base there. They didn't really want the military there. So it's kind of a biased environment, Clinton Air Force Base. And Stephen was just planning on going down to the river from school, because the county road goes over a river, and a lot of kids will hang out there, fish, whatever. And Lynn asks him, "Hey, well, you're going that way. Give me a ride. I want to go up to the Highway 8 up there and hitch a ride to the farm. There's some horses. Girls love their damn ponies, right?" Her excuse was to get away from her parents. They'd gotten into a fight or something. So he did. Lynn perches on the front handlebars. It's about 7 p.m. and he pedals her down County Road to Highway 8. And it's, a couple of kids saw him ride past the bush there. There's like a little forest area. And he drops her off and pedals back and stops at the bridge over the river. And looks back once and sees, oh yeah, someone picked her up, a new Chevy or something with lots of chrome on it and these goofy fins, sideway fins. She's getting into the car. And he thought nothing more of it. 11:20 that night, she's reported missing by Dad. So the military and everyone, they pull together, an organized search to go through the woods, and she's found. 2 days later, she is found, raped, strangled in the nearby woods. And so they collect the evidence. They did everything right at this stage. They collected insects. The original investigating doctor, entomologist, they took measurements of these and photographed the bugs and everything. They even identified the specimens, and it didn't do anything else with him. And so the investigation lasts 2 frickin' days. June 12th, Stephen is arrested, charged the next day, and then on the 30th of June, still 1959, the order comes, try him as an adult.
That's horrifying. Imagine how horrible his parents must have felt.
And so they start building this case against him based on their belief that he killed her in the time after he had ridden off with her at 7 a.m. between that and 7:45. They had a very narrow window that they were trying to peg this crime on him, and they were trying to completely ignore that there were 2 kids, one in the river and one up on the bridge, who saw them ride past. So that cuts down your time, that he could not have gone to the woods there and like through barbed wire and through the brush and dropped her off. And
plus there was a witness of someone witnessed her getting in a car.
Well, the person that supposedly killed her, right?
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah, they ignored the fact that he's completely clean. He's not cut up by getting through barbed wire. He's questioned without counsel, tried as an adult. They acted fast, and they forced all of the facts to fit the suspect. It's the one thing you do not do.
They just didn't want to. It was just messy and scary, and they didn't want any. They just wanted to clear it up as quickly as possible.
Right. I mean, and completely ignore that there's a military base next to you that's got all these people coming and going. A very narrow window to do a hell of a lot of things. And getting conviction meant that the cops had to throw out testimony from 2 of his classmates that saw him ride off with Lynn and return alone 5 minutes later. They threw out their testimony. They didn't give a rat's ass
because of their age.
Maybe, but I think it had more to do with they were trying to find clues that matched who they wanted to convict.
Tunnel vision, they call it.
Tunnel vision. So yeah, he's questioned without counsel. He's tried as an adult. The cops acted way too fast, and they forced facts to fit their suspect. The autopsy. The autopsy pathology doctor was Dr. John Peniston. He testified in trial that the time of death was determined from her decomposition and the state of partially digested food in her stomach. And he narrowed it down to that 30 minutes, which even by today's standards, claiming that kind of exactness is stretching credibility. Mm-hmm. You can't, as the one thing about forensic entomology and any of this kind of stuff is we'll get you in the ballpark, but forensic entomology isn't the thing that solves the crime. It is one of many pieces. It's not that exact a science.
It's a piece in the puzzle, and it can give you some direction, but it's not necessarily precise.
Right. But somehow he made it precise, which is not really possible. In fact, it was found out later, much, much later, that he had come up with 3 scenarios, 2 of which did not match the timeline, that she could not have been killed in the time he would have been with her. And he set those aside and went with the scenario that did. Like, you don't do that. That's not how it works.
No.
And in the day, this was a Canadian case. It actually drew a lot of comparisons to actually a really famous story of Sam Shepard, right? Like what The Fugitive was loosely based on, Harrison Ford and all that. Because it was a very similar thing, like people being accused and it gets pulled before Supreme Court, etc. And so Laborda's book and the Supreme Court trial, for lack of a better word, forced them to ask these questions about whether she had even been raped, actually. And there was even questions about like sores that he supposedly had on his penis, which of course today a scientist would tell you that that's like those kinds of sores and stuff on the man. That's not an indication of this, but at the time that's what they used. And also they found evidence that she was likely not found where she was murdered, which in itself totally blows apart the timeline for him to have been the person who did this. But the court the court didn't even really want to have to do this. The proof of this was that Le Bourdet, this woman who's put all of her heart and soul into this for not even her own kid, she shows up at the hearing and they couldn't be bothered to give her a seat. She had to like fumble around and find a seat for her own, or I think a press person had intentionally sat to give her a seat, right? To reserve it. Like they didn't want her there. They were annoyed that she had basically forced them to have to reopen a case. And they didn't give a damn anyway. With new forensic evidence presented on his behalf, with his own testimony in the first trial in 1959-1960, or 1959, he didn't even get a chance to tell his side of the story. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until this testimony, plus 25 witnesses, that he got to tell his story. And after 2 weeks, the Supreme Court ruled 8-1 against him, because they claimed there were too many incredibilities inherent in the evidence given by him, and we don't believe his testimony. Even though half the community is not buying this stuff, because none of this is making sense to anyone. This just does not seem like the person who did it. Even Dr. Peniston himself was questioning what he had done. He'd written a note a few years later that nobody knew about until afterwards. Actually, they did at the time, that he had written a note that he was now questioning his own information, that the time of death could have been up to 12 or more hours later.
You know, I've seen that in other cases where someone involved, an original investigator, or someone that had such influence over the case ends up questioning their decision-making and their tunnel vision much later, and they're not heard.
They're not heard.
They don't want, the court and the system doesn't want to hear their retraction.
And that's exactly what happened. This was never disclosed to the defense. And so he was sent back and served the remainder. He got out as a model prisoner. And so he got out in 1969. And so at that point, he was, I think, 24 years old. So at least he had a little bit of a life ahead of him. And he lived a quiet life under an assumed name, forever under the shadow of suspicion. Got married, had 3 kids, stayed off the radar, lived in Guelph, Ontario. But that eats at you. Like, I'm innocent.
At some point, you want your name cleared. You want your identity back.
Right. So he came forward. He had a conversation with his kids. He had decided to tell them when they were old enough, in their teens, like, so here's the deal. Because there was lots of moments in life that were difficult. That, for example, when Grandpa died, he wouldn't let the kids go to the funeral because he didn't want them to be photographed by media, right? Protect their privacy, because your dad was in prison for murdering someone. It is one of the most famous. And
eventually they would find out. So he had to come clean with them.
Right. So he has a discussion. Like, at this point, I think they knew he had explained to them his story. And the family agreed, yeah, go for it. So he spoke out and this is who I am, and I want to fight for this again. So there's a TV show in 2000, and there's even a book, and they all reopen it, and the likelihood that he was innocent. I mean, they even found an old case file, just by some sheer luck that somebody had happened to hold onto a case file from the military force, Air Force Base, because it had long since closed down in the 70s. But there was a whole other
I remember this story. I've read about this story before. Yeah, it's
like there's a soldier who had a whole record of having assaulted and picked up kids on the sides of roads in his car. And nobody, he ended up, his life was just a tragic mess of hell. He was dead by 1975 himself. But anyway, so 2001, like you were saying, the innocence groups, right? So there was this Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted, and they file an appeal to have the case reopened. Their first attempt was to have Lynn exhumed to look for DNA evidence, but it wasn't any. I mean, it's been at that point, 47 years? So they didn't find any DNA evidence of somebody else. But this is when bugs come to the rescue. Because if you remember, the cops, they did actually collect insects and maggot samples and even measured them because it's relevant, right?
Which is pretty miraculous that they did that, really, because so many cases they didn't do that.
Mm-hmm. And in forensic entomology, probably hadn't been advanced enough to really do enough with that.
Right. That's why it's amazing that they did that.
Yeah. So in 2006, Dr. Shara van der Hoeven, one of only 2 forensic entomologists in Canada at the time, I think by 2010 there were 3, and Professor Richard Merritt of Michigan State University in the U.S., one of only 12 forensic entomologists in the U.S. So, hey, all you people out there, you college students that are
and don't want to get paid.
Right.
Or paid very little.
There you go. There's a career path for you if you're up for it.
Yeah.
So they hired them to test things and testify. And so we'll talk about Van der Hoeven. She recreates the scene in the same little forested area where she drops off 3 dead pigs. So they used, I think you probably saw this, they use dead pigs a lot because they very closely approximate the muscle mass, fat mass, and the tissue of a human body. Mm-hmm. And so she replicates the whole scenario, drops them off in about 2 hours before sunset, which is about the time that they presume that Lynn's body was dropped off, and about the time that prosecutors say that she was killed. And I believe that Professor Merritt did the same thing or something similar. And then it gets kind of hairy because both entomologists end up reaching different conclusions. So Dr. Van der Hoeven found that a certain type of fly known as the blowfly, right, laid eggs almost immediately in the face of the pigs. Again, we were talking about that earlier. They go for the moist area, so you're going to find them in the face or a wound or something like that. And if the same were true for a human carcass, the maggots collected from Lynn's body at the time of death should have been larger. But they were not. What she found that the body could not have been dropped there until the next morning. The next morning. And
that's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference because, remember, the cops were trying to enforce a story of 30, 40 minutes that this had to have happened in. Again, remember, he didn't have scratches on his body from climbing through barbed wire or mud or anything to get this girl into the woods, do his thing with her.
And they thought that it wasn't the original crime scene originally.
No, they thought that this has all happened in the bush. It was based on there was a kid who had made a long since discredited claim that he had seen him and seen the 2 kids go into the bush there.
Okay.
Long since discredited, but that's what the cops hung their hat on, right? So, so her quote is, "Given that we don't have older insects on the body, it is likely she was killed after sunset on the 9th, but before 7 a.m. on the 10th. And then she gets cross-examined, and there's a discrepancy between her and the other entomologist. And so they were kind of at risk of this getting thrown out. Not to mention that they also pulled in somebody that claimed that the whole food in the stomach thing was bullshit because it was based on the idea that food in your stomach is gone after 2 hours, which we know today is not true. After 2 hours, there's still 70% of what you ate sitting in your stomach. So that is not something that you can base this on. So through all of that and the analysis that it contributed, though it was a little shaky. I don't know how much it contributed because, again, forensic entomology is just a piece of the puzzle. But finally, in 2006, they said that, oops, we're sorry. And he got a $6.5 million settlement.
I was just going to ask about that. I was hoping that he would get some sort of a settlement.
I don't know that makes up for having to spend 10 years and be traumatized.
It doesn't, but it's better than nothing. And and his name is cleared.
His name is, somewhat cleared because of the way Canadian law works. It's not a full exoneration.
But it's cleared in the public opinion.
In the public opinion, he is innocent. And nowadays they think that psychiatric evaluation from the military, they look at Sergeant Alexander Kalachik is very likely a sociopath with killer tendencies, and was known at the time. Somebody approached the cops about this. Hey, you should look at this guy, and they completely ignored.
Sloppy.
It amazes me how many times we've done that. It's not our intention, but our stories, we always stumble into these horrifyingly bad police procedure.
Sloppy, lazy, I mean, I get it. They're doing a job. But when you get that tunnel vision and you don't want to be bothered with looking elsewhere, it destroys lives. I mean, it's not just this kid, which is terrible that his life was destroyed, but you think about his family that suffered all these years with him behind bars and the shame and the worry and the pain.
His dad had to work
and the victim. And the parents of that victim thinking that this boy had murdered their child. And it's just tragic all the way around.
All the way around. But there's a wasp on your shoulder.
Well, you know what's funny that you mentioned that and this whole wasp thing? Because all day there was a wasp outside the kitchen window, just sitting on the kitchen window, like while I was doing the dishes. It's just sitting there, like doing its little...
Are there any beetles in there looking for cadavers?
No, maybe? This wasp, it's probably still there.
Is it?
It just sat on outside the kitchen window staring at me all day, like trying to get in the house. That's why I was a little freaked out, because I'm like... I've had an issue with a wasp all day.
You kind of freak out with the wasps.
Well, wasps are scary. And then when I was doing my laundry, the wasp was like hanging around me. So I've been dealing with a wasp all day.
Oh, and they love.
And then you brought in your wasp. Not good.
Oh, well, I mean,
I'm going to put that wasp in your little shoddy container with the hole in it and make you take it
Send
home.
Me home.
Yes. It's going home with you.
I mean, I went through some effort. I sat there with a little razor blade to make it look like something had chewed its way.
I just noticed that the lid was loose.
Oh, well, I put a lot of effort into that.
Well, you can just keep your little joke and play it on someone else.
Okay, fine. So that's our whirlwind whistle tour of
forensic entomology.
Yeah, I mean, it's a deeply interesting and deeply confusing topic. I mean, did you look through many like scientific papers to try and figure?
I did. I mean, I didn't do as much research as you, but I did do quite a bit, and I find it fascinating. I think you and I were similar as kids, where we spent a lot of time alone outside, and I would just randomly dig holes and look at bugs and just so curious about the nature around us.
I don't like to talk about that though, because I did weird things as a kid that, like, then I see stories like, what do you mean that's a sign of somebody who's
well, maybe we won't discuss that.
Well, okay, I'll tell you that, like, I loved anteaters.
Anteaters?
Yeah, they make the little pits for ants to fall in, and then they eat the ants. So I would like tip ants in. Like,
I don't know about that. What?
I'm just feeding anteaters.
Oh my gosh. I had ant farms.
Oh, now we're diametrically opposed.
And I don't even know what that means with the anteaters, but I'm sure that you didn't.
Oh, you think I'm talking about the mammal? No, it's the little tiny bugs that make the pits in the.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you could do that.
I didn't pull the wings off many flies.
Oh my gosh! Oh, you have to edit this out.
I'm kidding.
No. But I was telling you that when I was doing some research yesterday and I was sitting outside and suddenly I was like, there was flies all over me.
They know.
They know. I must have been producing weird enzymes.
Weird death enzymes?
Yes.
Ooh, that's scary.
I bet I was.
Don't do that.
Well, I'm not going to do it ever again.
I mean, maybe I should shower more. I don't know.
Now you have your little bug collection.
I do. I'm never going to get a lady. All right. So maybe this is a good time to wrap this up.
Wrap it up. I'll take it. Wrap.
That's... You totally haven't rehearsed this song.
It just came to my mind.
Okay.
We're crazy today. Hey, thanks for listening. We love you guys. We appreciate you. Check us out on our website, bloodyshed.com. Like us, share us. Make sure to visit our Patreon page, please.
Please.
And I forgot my freaking gong again.
God damn it. Just, bang on your head or something.
I'm going to bang something.
Bang a gong. Okay.
All right. We love you guys. Thank you so much. And
wait,
thanks, Moonlight Magic.
For our wonderful intro and outro song.
H is for horse.
And you can find it on our album, Phoenixotica.
Yes.
And
on Spotify.
So we're going to buzz on out of here.
Speaking of bugs, do you hear those cicadas out there?
Cicadas, welcome to the monsoon season.
Wow, they're loud all of a sudden.
I love cicadas, except when you catch them, they pee on you.
Do they really?
Yeah, you've never had a cicada pee on you?
No, I have not. On that note, we love you. Bye. You need like a whole like little science shelf, I think.
You think?
Yeah.
Like the shelf has to say whatever's on the shelf had nothing to do with.
Well, you just need to group your super weird stuff together.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I just need to find a lady that's into bugs.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
It's not my thing. I'm just into bugs this week.
Yeah, I know.
I'll be bored with it next week.
But now you have a bug collection.
It's a very small bug collection.
Those are pretty awesome bugs, though. I do appreciate you bringing them, sharing your bugs.